I'm going to ask a question here to complement, I imagine, what your answer might be, which is whether you think that all this part we have today, for example, I'll mention the most recent one, which is the impulse response. The IRs we're talking about, do you think these technologies today represent a threat to traditional analog pedals?
I think it might represent a threat in terms of consumption due to the accessibility of some models and our purchasing power, which is limited. But in terms of threatening the existence of... No, not at all. In music, all tools are cumulative. To this day, we haven't stopped using practically anything that we used at the beginning. Since 1930?
Yes. That's one of the reasons why I think it doesn't threaten. It doesn't threaten. When you take, I have at home, it's quite old now, but I love it. I have an Apogee HD 500. I really like that multi-effect a lot. And what's the deal? When you start messing with it, you begin to notice a few things. First, there are the amplifier simulations. Then when you look at the amplifier simulations, it's what we consider the classics. Mesa Boogie Eye. Love the sound of Mesa oof, from the Orit Fire. I love that tone. Really heavy, that low mid-range is a knockout. You have Marshall, then it goes from the JTM 45, JCM 800, Plexi, sometimes JCM 900. You'll go through, then there's, for this example, Supro, a clean amplifier. 900 you'll go through. Then there's, for example, Supro Uhum, Clinton. Incredible. Then you'll go through a lot of things. And at the very end, there are 2 or 3 that are like Line 6 Insane. Line 6, which are from Line 6's own amplifiers. When you go to the pedal, it's the same thing. You'll start going through, wow, through delete, you'll go through carbon copy, a bunch of things. And at the very end, you have the Line Park from Line 6, Echo Park. Then you'll go through drive, I don't know what. Then there's another name in front. When you look at the manual, there's the one from Line 6. So, these simulations are there, right? Because we still like this canto echo. To grab the phase 90, turn it on, twist the knob. And that simulation is there because this pedal became iconic. Right. We have brands nowadays launching new pedals. And I believe we might not have a new Tube Screamer. But you have companies making their versions of the Tube Screamer that are just as good as, for example, a TS9, a TS808. So I think it doesn't represent a threat. Within our reality, in our market, Brazil, which I see as an emerging country with a still very fragile economy, we have a very devalued currency. I believe that, for example, this part of the pedals will be for a more select audience. For people who have a higher purchasing power and who are also looking for a more specific sound. The person wants that specific tone. They don't want a simulation of the tone. They want the actual pedal because they want to put it in the signal chain and all. Because whether we like it or not, the simulation is not exactly the same as the pedal.
Yeah, but I think that's great.
I think so too.
Because it becomes an alternative instead of being a copy.
Exactly.
It's already another sound that you can use. Sometimes, for example, the other day I went to record a guitar with a phaser. I took a small stone, a phase 90, and a simulation on the multi-effects and went to see where I could find what I wanted. And often, depending on what you want, the adjustment might be more at hand on the multi-effects. I also think so, and I also see the following. For example, on my pod, it has amplifier simulations. But something funny happens.
In some amplifiers, you don't have mid-control, especially the more vintage ones that had bass and treble control. Sometimes you can achieve a nice sound because in that simulation, when you open it, it has mid-control. Sometimes it has, for example, bay control. And then you're like, wow. But with this amplifier, you couldn't make this kind of adjustment, and then it allows you to do it. It gives you the possibility to have, there's a plus there, right? Yes, there's an extra control that you wouldn't have in the original, which sometimes helps you reach the sound you're looking for. That's in your head without needing, for example, to use an equalization pedal beforehand and having to deal with all those parameters and such. Sometimes you just, man, tweak here. Wow, you got it. Then someone says, oh, but this amplifier doesn't have a mid control. But I got the sound I wanted, and that's what matters to me.
There will be purism about this, for God's sake, right?
There are people who completely abhor digital, and by digital, I mean multi-effects, which are simulations. Because the real tone is the tube amplifier and the pedal. It depends. Sometimes that's not the sound the person is looking for.
Our tone and is our head first and foremost.
Exactly.
So whether you reach it all more easily through analog or digital equipment, that's another matter.
That's a different thing.
But ideally, you should work to be able to achieve it in any situation.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you because the important thing is to be able to get the sound you want with whatever, right? For example, going back to the fuzz issue. You mentioned that Keith Richards doesn't like using fuzz, but they got the sound they were looking for there with that pedal. They got that tone with that pedal. He couldn't get it with any other. He got there, right? Hey man, there's this pedal here. Try it out to see if it's what you're looking for. They got the sound. Okay, let's record. So that's it.
Exactly.
I think there shouldn't be this demonization of digital equipment because I think it makes a lot of things easier for us nowadays.
It doesn't exist in my setup. I mean, actually, my setup varies a lot depending on the work I do, even though there is a backbone that always remains. But in my work, I usually mix. I don't see why not mix things. There are effects that I can only achieve digitally. There are effects that I can only achieve analogically. So I combine both things.
Especially because if digital were that bad, we have the DD7, which is the digital delay, from Boys, right? Which is digital, so we can't. Oh no, only what's analog is good, and all that.
No, that doesn't exist. This is a dialogical and digital discussion.
You could spend hours talking about this.
But I also think that at the same time, it's a discussion that needs to move on.
Yes, I agree.
Because it makes no sense at all.
I agree. It's like the issue. On Starling Cast, we talked a lot about the issue of wood. Does wood influence or not? I think this is something that was already like, brother, come on, right. It's over. Like, there are more important things for us to worry about in this matter. Is there an influence? Yes, but how much does it influence?
Yeah, it's more like, does wood influence the sound of the guitar a lot for you, So it's really up to each person, actually. If you pick up two guitars with different wood and feel a big difference, man, then it influences you. If I pick them up and don't feel it, it doesn't influence me.
That's all right.
Now, regarding what really influences, I think a very important thing in terms of setup that people should always be aware of, and which is the foundation for building. Your tone are the transducers. And in the case of a guitar setup, it's the pickups, the speaker, and the miking. If you can't find yourself there, you won't get there. And I'm talking about both physical and virtual.
It's cool that you mentioned that when I was recording Torquato's guitar course, he recorded a setup course on how to get the sound out of the guitar. One of the modules we recorded inside a studio in Malibu. And it was amazing because it exactly hit the point. You mentioned, for example, about transducers, microphone, speaker, pickup, and everything else. He was playing with his son on the Bogner. The cabinet that was in the studio, if I'm not mistaken, was also a Bogner, a 412. But we mic'd it with a 421 at the back of the amp. The 421 at the front, the Royer. The 121 and the 57, the classic. And we were playing around by turning off a washed microphone that was coming to us in the control room to like turn off the rear microphone, the 421 at the back, right? To see how it loses that, as Torquato said, the punch, how it loses that punch from the amplifier and all. And we were like, wow, cool. And then there was a setup where both 421s were on. He left them on, turned off the Royer, turned off the 57s, and kept the 421 in front. And the 421 at the rear of the inflator. When it played, I said, man, it completely changed the guitar sound. And it reminded me of a guitar tone. Wow, very specific, like the 80s. That tone, I said, brother, that's crazy. And we didn't change the guitar, didn't change the position of the mics, didn't change the amplifier's equalization. We were in the control room. We were just turning the microphones on and off. When you left only the 57 on, it was one sound. When you left only the 421 on, it was another, and it was completely different. Man, what you said is fantastic.
You see how many variables we have just with the transducers, huh?
Yes.
Dude, it's like a galaxy.
Man, it's something that, if you look at it, there are so many variables, right? A lot.
So you have to find yourself there with the transducers, and from there, you start developing.
You start putting everything together there.